Hello and welcome to Who Is Best, a show where I, Claudine, take games that give you choices and rate those choices in a tier list. If you asked me what the best Fire Emblem game out there was, I would reply Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. I am a huge fan of the classic style, and although I do enjoy the newer titles, you just can't beat good old Fire Emblem. Anyway, today we are taking on the tremendous act of rating the units in Path of Radiance. And yes, this is the second time I am recording this. Somehow my data got corrupted, but whatever. This was not an easy list, and I imagine this won't draw in a ton of views, so if you're a fan, please give this video and this channel some love. Now, we will be considering a lot when it comes to this game. Units make a huge difference in playstyle. Now, I want to address a few things I know are going to show up in the comments first. Yes, when you played, I'm sure insert favorite unit was amazing. You killed all the enemies with them and they became broken. This is not a hard game. That is unless you play on the hardest difficulty, which then it becomes insanely punishing. That is the difficulty we are addressing here. You can make pretty much any unit broken if you pour enough experience into them, but that aside, we are here to find out who is best in Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. When considering the units, we'll be looking at accessibility throughout the game, range, stats, growth, and unit type. There are a few weapon types to choose from, 3 of the most important being the holy trinity of swords, spears, and axes. Unfortunately, swords are easily the worst due to lack of long-range capabilities. Also, mounted units are broken. They are so incredibly imbalanced in almost everything, so keep that in mind. Finally, yes, there will be a bonus list at the end of this video. Small note, there will be minor spoilers here on what units you get throughout the game, but I think that was obvious from the start. Now, without further ado, I give you the outside tier. Okay, let's do this quick. You can get extra characters as you do an outrageous amount of playthroughs of Path of Radiance. I've chosen to ignore these. Use them if you'd like. They are good for the most part. Now, without further ado, I give you the tier. First up are the dragons Enna and Nazir. You get these two towards the end of the game depending on if you kill the Black Knight or not. Enna is easily worse than Nazir as she is a lower level, but Nazir isn't much better. They come so late that you're better off just ignoring them. Next is Lucia. A massive fan favorite. You get Lucia towards the end of the game as well. Other than speed, she has below average stats and mediocre growth potential. Following Lucia is Bastion, who doesn't fare much better. He's a low-speed sage who can't use staffs. He joins late game, his stats are horrible, and yeah. Next is our first, meaning one of the worst, Laguz. Ulki is a late-game bird Laguz, missing the one thing that makes a bird Laguz good, speed. If you want to use a bird, go with one of the others over him. The final member of the tier is Taraneo. He is a late-game general that is just simply a wall, nothing more. By the time you get him anywhere, the battle will be over, so just ignore him. The low tier. First of the low tier, or what I like to call the bench tier, is Shinon. Bows suck, and he leaves the party for the majority of the game. By the time he rejoins, he's so underleveled that really there is no use for him. But seeing as he helps you get through the beginning levels, I guess he's somewhat useful. Next is Largo, who is a pathetic copy of Hawkeye. He's the only berserker you get and joins late game, meaning he just isn't that useful. Devdin has high strength but low speed. He's really just another useless unit. Braum is joining Devdin as a useless unit as well. Armored Knights are horrible units altogether, and this guy joins mid to late game. Rolf needs a ton of work to be useful. He has subpar stats and okayish growth. His biggest redeeming factor is he comes with a special bow. Gatry is another armored knight that leaves the party for a large amount of time. His movement is abysmal, and you probably won't use him. The final member of the low tier is Soth. Soth would easily be the worst character in the game if it wasn't for the fact that he's one of the 2 thieves you receive and doesn't charge you to open doors and chests. He can't promote, but probably will still be a member of your party when the occasion appears. Okay, we're splitting the mid tier into 2 parts since we have so many to go, so let's start with the lower mid tier. First up on the lower mid tier is Ranolf. He's a late game Laguz that doesn't transform at the beginning of battle. He's a decent tank, but other than that, not very useful and definitely not worth equipping the Demi-Band. Next is Januff, whose decent speed and HP stat pushed him just barely into the lower mid tier. He joins late and you probably won't use him. Volk is the first thief you get, and again can be extremely useful because of his class. He does charge a little bit of gold to open chests and doors, but it's really negligible. Zyhark is our first but not last Myrmidon on the low tier. Like I said, swords aren't amazing weapons, and seeing as he's not a mounted unit as well just puts him at a big disadvantage. He joins later than Mia, and you'll probably be good by the time you get him. Speaking of Mia, she is a super fast unit and you get her early, which is great, but her class hampers her usefulness in the late game. Did I still use her? Absolutely. Did I use her in Radiant Dawn?
Come on, man.
Next is one of the early support characters, Rice. As a staff healer, he is useful, though not for much. You'll use him, but missed usefulness as a Valkyrie and future Sage will make him a for sure late game benched character. Stefan has absolutely amazing stats. He's the best sword wielder with high speed and crit, but unfortunately because of the broken nature of this game, it just isn't worth too much in the late game. Tormod's high movement and his use of magic by default make him better than all the characters we've talked about so far, but that's not saying much as there really isn't anything else about him that would make him useful. Nephany beats out Stefan simply because of being able to wield spears, which are arguably the best weapon type in the game. If she was a mounted soldier, she'd be in the top tier, no questions asked. Jeffrey is a late game paladin. Because he's a paladin, he has to be placed high, but honestly, I don't know why this guy is here. You probably won't use him over the units that you've trained up from the beginning. Elincia is the second best healer in the game. She flies and has nearly mastered staffs by the time she joins, but unfortunately that is late game. That coupled with the fact that she's extremely squishy make her a hard one to recommend for optimal late game teams. Har is a very late game unit with amazing stats and growth rates. If you had him for a larger section of the game, he'd probably be one of the best units in the game. And that wraps up the lower mid tier. Now on to the upper mid tier. Though Khalil is a late game sage who can't wield staffs, her ability to wield nearly every single tomb makes her extremely useful when you finally get her. If she could also wield staffs, she'd be a god tier candidate for sure. Mist is a late game support unit that has the very unique promotion to Valkyrie, meaning that she becomes a mounted unit. This makes her extremely versatile and gives her the Canter ability. Ileana has much higher strength than Soren but lacks in speed, which hurts her on some double casting potential. She joins mid-game and has access to lightning magic, which is much better than wind magic. I'd honestly put her above Soren out of personal preference, but I don't want to come off as a fanboy. Soren and Ileana really are interchangeable. He's here from the start, and though he lacks in the early game, can grow to be one of your best units. We've finally gotten to the better Laguz in Path of Radiance. These were hard to place, if I'm being honest, but we'll start with Miriam. You get him later than the others, but man is this guy just an insane tank of a character. High speed and attack slapped on top of that make him pretty much an armored knight with the movement of Myrmidon. Next is Mordecai. Mordecai isn't as good as Miriam when it comes to stats, but his skill Smite makes him indispensable in some fights. I know shoving a character forward one space might not seem like much, but believe me, it comes in handy. Leth is the second best Laguz unit in the game. She transforms at the beginning of the battle, has high speed and strength as well as amazing growth rates and mobility. She can be a little squishy, especially when not transformed, but that's about it. The final member of the upper mid tier is Ike. Yes, Ike. On casual play, this guy is a beast, but given that he lacks the movement and range of the other units, in late game he'll trail behind the rest, but given enough attention he can be disgustingly powerful. The top tier. Okay, now we're getting there. We'll start with Boyd, whom I almost left in the upper mid tier, but man is this guy just beastly. You get him at the beginning and can build him into a complete nuclear bomb with axes and mobility. Next is the worst mounted knight in the game, Makalov. Despite being the worst, he still makes it to the top tier by default due to being a mounted unit. After Makalov is Astrid. Astrid is a bow user, yes, which is less than ideal, but as she is a mounted unit and has all the advantages that come with it, she made it to the top tier pretty easily. Next on the top tier is Tanith, who is a wyvern unit that joins late in the game. but that doesn't stop her from being just a complete beast of a unit. The imbalance of flying units is one of the biggest oversights of Path of Radiance. She has affinity with the most powerful characters in the game and is over-leveled when you first get her. After Tanith is one of my personal favorite knights, Kieran. Kieran is a mounted axe knight, so buoyed on a horse. He joins mid-game, but is well worth the investment. The final member of the top tier is Oscar. You get Oscar at the beginning, and he wields spears on a horse. His support with Ike makes him unhittable if they're next to each other, and with javelins, he has the range options nearly from the beginning of the game. The God tier. These characters are the best in the entire game, and all of them are worth having in your endgame team. First is the best support character, Racin. Racin is a bird lagoose that is built similar to dancers and other Fire Emblems. The difference here is that when he is transformed, he gives all units around him a second turn. That is just plain insane and broken. He also passively heals all those around him, and though squishy, he has insane resistance to magic. His biggest downfall is that he can't attack, but honestly, who really cares? Jill is the best Wyvern rider in the game. She joins mid-game and needs some work, but can be built into the best unit on the map. High mobility, defense, and strength offset her vulnerability to archers. Marcia beats out Jill because of how early you get her. Like Jill, with a bit of work, she can become your best unit. Marcia can abuse the hit and run strategy with her high mobility and resistance to magic. Level her up and equip her with the right weapons, and she'll be a one-woman army. Speaking of one-woman army, the last member of the God tier and top of this list is Titania. Amazing stats in both strength and speed, coupled with the ability to use both lances and axes effectively, coupled with the fact that she is a mounted knight that is already promoted at the start of the game, coupled with her amazing counters, coupled with... I'm just kidding. Well, you get the picture. She's there from the first chapters and never leaves. She'll carry you through the early, mid, and late game. And that's my list. Be sure to tell me how I mispronounce all the names in the comments below. Bonus round. Top 10 Path of Radiance ladies. Number 10, Enna. Number 9, Elincia. Number 8, Lucia. Number 7, Leth. Number 6, Marcia. Number 5, Astrid. Number 4, Mia. Number 3, Nephany. Number 2, Ileana. And number 1, Soth.